State of the Texans 10 weeks in, and a special guest gives his thoughts on where the Texans are. The best case, worst case scenario, some crazy theories, plus the DeMeco Ryans bit continues. Let's go inside the locker room.
Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, locker room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Local live.
All right, it is the locker room, number one source for Texans digital content. Let's just hop right into it. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. You know why we're here. 10:30 every night, Monday through Friday. SNL with Cody Stutes, 9 a.m. Monday through Friday as well. The Texans were on the scene. Execute was used. I think the final tally was 8 times with DeMeco Ryans. I think execute was used 8, if I'm not mistaken. We'll check it out and continue to live the execute bit, as well as something that DeMeco does that I think is actually pretty funny. It's actually pretty amusing when it comes to one of the biggest weaknesses on the team. But let's bring in Mike Meltser, Mad Dog Radio. You remember him from Sports Radio 610 Days. Haven't talked to Mike actually about the Texans this year. He's been doing a lot of things, so this is actually kind of a treat for me. I'm kind of intrigued to hear what you have to say about this squad 10 weeks in. Kind of familiar territory, Melts. There's not really a threat for you to lose the division, but you also, the way that you've played, you don't appear to be like a real threat to be a contender. So like an extreme contender and taking the next step, or do you? What is your assessment of where the Texans are 10 weeks in?
Landry, I was as optimistic as I've been in my 14 years living in Houston before the season began. And this has been a pretty bitter disappointment, especially offensively. Like, I think the Texans offense, like as a unit, has been arguably the most disappointing, like individual unit in the NFL, like across the board, across all 32 teams. I think they're going to have a hard time losing this division, considering the Colts keep playing Joe Flacco for whatever reason. I think that's a waste of time. I think each of the next 4 games is incredibly winnable. Even with what we've seen, it's very possible.
3 for sure. 3 for sure.
For sure. I could easily see this team winning, 4 in a row, or certainly 3 of the next 4 games. But you look at what's happening offensively, and like, I'm sure a lot of us had the same feeling in that second half. Like, I kept looking at the scoreboard being like, God, how is there so much time left in this game? Like, how is there so much time? And I think that's coupled with like the offense just felt like dead after a while. Like, even with the talent they have, and I understand no Nico, no Stefon Diggs, the offensive line's been a mess, all these things that we know, like just the feeling with a quarterback like CJ Stroud that you're like, God, it feels like getting one first down is like climbing a massive hill. And I do think, Landry, they got a bit unlucky with not getting that pass interference on third down. I think they get it. They probably win that game. But yeah, overall, looking at the season, between the offensive coordinator, like they still can't really run the football. Joe Mixon's stat line, it's not really his fault, but like if you take a good running back and you have 25 carries for 46 yards, that's like a humiliating stat line in a game. And it speaks to what has been an issue this season, last season. Like, they still can't really run the football. And it's like, when is this franchise going to be able to run the ball? And the quarterback has not been as good as he was in 2023 as well.
Yeah, I think with Mixon, they've been able to run it a little bit. It definitely took a plummet against the Lions. Your issue, like on that third down, I feel like second down for me was the no-brainer passing down for the Texans. That was the problem that I had with Bobby Slowik. And I kind of want to get to a theory that you threw out there. But yes. I thought when the final play before the 2-minute warning, you use your best pass play, you get that first out, clock stopping no matter what. So, and you're not running the ball effectively. So to me, that was the biggest mistake, along with the 3rd and 10, where they just act like 56-yarders or chip shots or something like that. I don't know when that started to become the philosophy, but for me, I think you throw on second down no matter what, especially in that situation where it's already a really long field goal. That was my issue. But you actually had like an interesting theory, which I don't even want to bury the lead on it, but you have a Miami Fairbairn theory that I saw you throw out there, the Meltser Fairbairn theory, if you will.
Yeah, here's my theory. It sounds a little weird, But I think the Texans would be better off as a team this year if Fairbairn was worse at long kicks. Remember, like the first, I'm going to look this up. Like Kaimi got here in 2017. So the first like 5 to 6 years of his career, I think the take on him was basically, okay, this guy is a lock to make kicks like 40, 45 and in. But once you get to like 50 plus, like doesn't have the strongest leg at that time at least. And it's like, okay, we can count on him. He's reliable. He's going to make the big kicks, but he doesn't have the biggest leg. And so this is what we've got. This season, it's been, he's hitting walk-offs against Buffalo, nailing all these long field goals. And I think you combine that with an already conservative head coach a little bit in DeMeco Ryans. And I think it's hurt this team, Landry, at the opponent's like 35-yard line, 40-yard line, where they seem way too happy to settle for maybe getting 3 points. Like, think about the situation you were in on Sunday. It's not just Sunday's game, but it's a microcosm. If they make that kick, they're up by 3. The game's not over.
Yeah.
It's not over.
They got like about a minute 50 to go kick a field goal of their own.
Yes.
And it's one of the best offenses in the NFL. Like, let's
With
not.
The best offense in the NFL, having, unlike you, 4 downs to get the yardage. And I just wonder, in watching that game, reflecting on the season, if given the struggles offensively in a weird way, if they might be better off if Kaimi was shakier from 50 plus, to where once they got to like the opponent's 40 and 38 and 35, they're like, hey, this is the area where we have struggled offensively, running it, pass protecting, but we got to give ourselves 4 downs to get 10 yards. And that ultimately is the thing that might raise whatever ceiling this offense has. And I do think that they have a ceiling offensively that's much higher than what we've seen, starting when you get Nico Collins back.
Yeah, I agree with that. Shout out to Baron for swarming the super chat. Appreciate you, Baron. The thing for me is I think that the frustrating thing about this team, I don't feel like you're in no man's land, where I think I use 2016 and I'll even use 2018 and 2019 as an example, although the way that 2019 ended, some may feel different. But it's not like I feel like it's just a helpless ceiling with this team. And that's really what's frustrating, is you have a defense that I think can carry you and keep you in a lot of games, especially when they get full strength.
Landry, the defense has been awesome.
It's been incredible. And
it's been tremendous.
2 elite efforts have been wasted. And it doesn't, they're not dependent on players like the offense appears to be. Like if 5 starters are out, they put together a good effort against Green Bay. If Will Anderson's out, they make the Lions look as pedestrian as they have. So I think you have that. I also think you have a quarterback with elite talent. Now, are his surroundings ideal? Not in front of him and definitely not on the sidelines. But when you do get Nico Collins back, it changes a lot of things. It's just, you don't want to be this player dependent in a league where more times than not you're going to have to deal without elite pieces. So that's the thing to me, and that's what's frustrating, is the expectations have risen. I don't think they're completely gone. Yeah, I just think they're going to have to get to where maybe CJ flips the switch, because the schematic thing's interesting too, and we can get into that a little bit more too.
I still think, like, you look at this team and, barring some sort of collapse, which I think would require like CJ to get hurt at some point. So hopefully that obviously doesn't happen. This is the kind of team that even if they, limp along to like a 9 or 10 win season and it looks kind of like this the rest of the way, like, you put this team in a playoff game and all of a sudden you've got, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter rushing off the edge. You've got a very talented quarterback. You've got a team that theoretically can beat any team really on any field, even if they haven't necessarily shown it. But I mean, like, you just want to progress each season, right? And I understand that, like, progression is not always a linear thing, but there was a lot made in the offseason about, you keep the offensive coordinator, you keep the quarterback coach, everything else remains stable, the offensive line remains intact. And finally, like, they've been trying to get this offensive line together for a couple of years. They finally did. And somehow it has been one of the worst lines in football, to where I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, remember all those games last year where it was like Laramie Tunsil's out, or Titus Howard's out, or a couple of guys on the interior out.
And Deculus started at left tackle a game.
Yes.
And
like,
they won. And they won.
Like, Michael Dieter's playing. Like, all these random guys. And I was amazed last season because they kept succeeding, despite that or with that. And somehow the offensive line has been at least like 30% worse from last season to this season. Like, how do you explain that?
Well, and the biggest mystery to me and the beauty, the reason that I'm enjoying talking to you so much is because I literally haven't talked to you about the season. Like I haven't. Like you become a partner at the firm and stuff, and you've been busy and I've been busy. But
I'm not that. I'm around. I'm alive.
Guy, you're a busy guy. It's all good. But I like it because I haven't talked to you about this. But I said this the other day. Like, let's say that you were there was some sort of like someone came to you, like a client came to you and they said, I want you to investigate this situation. And and you investigate it and it has nothing to do with football at all. Like you can't watch tape, nothing, but you study the state of the offensive line this year compared to last year. If you did that investigation, you would have to come to one of two. You would take two things and have to come to some sort of conclusion to try to make sense of it. Because last year, the offensive line was way more depleted and they were way more effective. So either it's someone on this offensive line that is just so bad, or the guys that are here now every week are just so bad that you just can't function, or the more time that the coaches spend trying to tell these guys things, the worse off they get. Like that's the only explanation I can make, because that's the problem that I have. And a lot of the viewers and a lot of the listeners, they get frustrated because I'm critical of Bobby Slowik. And I think there's tangible things and there's a lack of feel that Bobby Slowik displays. But I saw this same coaching staff last year with a different offensive line every week perform at a better level. They got Devin Singletary a contract, and now all of a sudden he's back to what we thought he was before. So that's what it makes it really confusing when it comes to Bobby Slowik is this awful. I think he's been bad, but make sense of what we saw last year compared to this year. It's hard to do.
Yeah, it's like I almost want to go back and like watch some of those games and figure out what was going on. I don't know if it was like you're tempted to say things like, oh, they caught people off guard, but that's kind of a weird thing to say because like last year, these opposing defensive coordinators are studying that offensive line. Like their jobs are on the line. They're trying to do things against that weakened offensive line. So why would it be better last season than this year? I mean, I'm just looking like I thought Kenyon Green, and I still think this, he was in much better shape this season than he was last year and the year before. I know he got hurt and he was horrible. But it's not, but it feels, Landry, like each offensive lineman, like you go up and down the board, has been the worst version of themselves. Say what you will about Laramie Tunsil, and I have said a lot. Laramie Tunsil has not been very good this season. And I'm not even talking about oh, this guy doesn't run block. I mean, like in pass protection, it doesn't feel like
he's whiffed a couple times. Like Titus Howard actually kind of bailed him out on that play because we're talking about Titus Howard trying to strip CJ Stroud, which, by the way, DeMeco, that's a weird like cover up for a player. Like it's one thing to say focus on the positives, but like we saw he was clearly trying to pull a Caleb Williams and strip the ball and be a hero. Weird. But it is what it is with DeMeco and the O-line. But Laramie Tunsil got completely mixed there for the second straight week. And the other thing about it is, even if you want to say Laramie Tunsil is fine, like he's your best offensive lineman, he still leads the league in penalties. Like it's
that hurts. So left tackle isn't as good. Left guard's been a catastrophe. Center has been, I guess, below average. Like it's Scruggs for most of the games, and then obviously Patterson
way worse in the pass blocking communication with Scruggs at center compared to Patterson.
Yes, and then Shaq Mason, like
he's washed. He's washed. I mean, I'm just being honest. He's done.
Yeah, you have a couple of like reps per game where it's like, oh, okay, 69 is getting beaten, and that's going to hurt CJ because that's pressure right at the middle. Yeah. And
he's on the back end.
And then we get to the right tackle. Then we get to the right tackle. And I give you credit, Landry. You've been on this for a while. So I like prospects like this. I like the guy who's like, hey, he was a quarterback and then he became a tackle and he's like a great athlete. Like I like that kind of prospect in general. And listen, Titus has not been a bad player. Like he was way better than if they had drafted Andre Dillard, and nobody talks about it nationally. But compared to his talent and what he could be, his career has been a disappointment in this uniform. Like his overall career, if you look season to season, you factor in the injuries, it has not been nearly the kind of career that, let's say, Eric Winston had with the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
So up and down the offensive line, like each guy is the worst version of themselves.
Swarm into the super chat, Kevin Smith up there. Running the ball on 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10 when we're getting 2 yards a run. Why? Ask Bobby, please. Yeah, he's been run happy. And the feel has been bad. But the Titus thing, yeah, I just don't I don't understand why they gave him an extension last year. Like I just don't. I did not understand why. Like if anything, let's see what this guy does. Let's see what he's got. Let's make him earn his extension and figure it out. It did not make sense to me. A lot of it's been health. A lot of it's been he's played guard instead of tackle. So I get that, and I am with you. Like it was like panic because Andre Dillard got drafted, but he just I don't feel like Titus Howard's better than George Fant.
You're right. They've not had a more effective offensive line this season with him over George Fant.
Yeah, like if we're going back to last year and we're just talking like intangibly, like Shaq was here last year, Juice was here, Tunsil. I don't feel like Titus is an upgrade over George Fant.
He has not been. He has not been an upgrade. And the thing about these runs, like, I don't know if you saw that video that's gone viral a little bit on Twitter, Landry, but like when the guy broke down some of these long, these 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10 runs by Slowik and the EPA and how like the Texans with the expected points added based on running plays for the last year and a half, like a year and a half have been by far, not like by a little bit, they have been by far the worst team in the NFL when they choose to run in the last year and a half. Not a small sample size. What frustrates me about these like 3rd and 10s and 2nd and 10s, the way I've watched football for like 25 or 30 years is like if you're running like a draw or a delay, like there should be some reason why you're calling a run to where I want at least 5 or 6 yards. I want a hope of a first down to where I'm like, oh, you're trying to catch the defense off guard. They have fewer guys in the box. There's some reason. And instead it's like this, delay or a draw. And then like, here's a defensive tackle right on top of a guy. Like that drives me nuts. If it's a 1st and 10, okay, I can deal with incompetence, but there's a reason why you are calling these plays on 3rd and long once in a while to like catch the defense off guard. And you still lose yardage. And that is what drives me crazy.
The 3rd and 10 the other night was really weird. I mean, you had actually converted a 3rd and 10 and 3rd and 16, but like before that. And then that was when it would have been a 53-yard field goal. Actually lost 3 yards on the run. And it ended up being a 56-yarder. That was weird. The other thing is I feel like early in the season, they had some good 2nd down runs. I think it was almost because they didn't expect you to run it on 1st and 2nd down. Like Joe Mixon had some good second down runs, and it was like, well, they were surprised because they did not expect you to do it on 1st and 2nd. And that's my problem is that I just don't think Bobby Slowik has displayed a real feel of what the F is going on. And you go back to the Green Bay game, the way that whole thing went, that catastrophe.
Yes.
And then the Lions game where I don't know what the hell was going on there, not throwing on 2nd down, and then the 3rd and 10. I get that the offensive line is the offensive line, and it's not easy, but there doesn't seem to be like a big feel. And I don't know if Nico Collins makes that big of a difference. I think he's going to make a big difference for sure. I think it's going to look a lot better. It's just, if I'll put it this way, if the Texans offense was as coached as good as the Texans defense is, then I think we're talking about far and away, talent included, the number one threat to the Chiefs, not even close. And I don't like if that's the best way I can put it. Regardless of the personnel and all these things, if you gave DeMeco the equivalent of what Bobby Slowik has to work with, regardless of how crappy we think these offensive linemen are, I think that this team is elite and they're the biggest threat to the Chiefs. And they might actually have more upside.
We're on the same page. I'm trying to I didn't go on social media after Sunday's game because I thought like the emotions would be so high. And I actually thought like
they were.
in my time in Houston, I don't know what people said about this, Landry, but I thought that was like the worst, maybe the worst regular season loss I had seen, not in terms of the stakes, but in terms of the game. The only other one I thought of was in 2010 against Jacksonville when they lost in the Hail Mary where they tried to knock it down. They lost in the final play, but like that was the like magnitude of like the game itself. But at the same time, like we're being very negative about the team and the offense. Like I think the Lions might be the best team in the NFL, and they were crushing the Lions through a half. And they came very close to beating them.
No,
they also,
that's the frustrating thing, though, is that I feel like they've wasted. And I asked Alshire about this, and I asked Petrie about it, and of course they said the right thing because they're accountable and they're kind of cut off of DeMeco. But I just feel like you can't waste elite efforts. Like we've seen, like it seemed like they did it with Deshaun early on, where Deshaun Watson would put out elite, unbelievable efforts, and the defense would wet the bed and they would let him down. Like we saw it when he was a rookie twice. I think it was Seattle and New England.
Yes.
Where they allowed the Jimmy Graham touchdown, and then New England at the end, Amendola, I think it was, who scored, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe Brandon Cooks as well. Yeah.
Cooks had a big play as well. But it's just you rarely get like elite performances. And I think between what they did in Green Bay when they were so depleted and what they did against the Lions, it's just, you're not asking for a lot, man. Like you're not asking for a lot, and wasting efforts like that. It's cool because you'll get the opportunity late in the season because the division is so bad, but it's just it just feels that's what playoff games often feel like what the Green Bay and Detroit game feels like. And that's the frustrating thing, is that they're wasting elite efforts on one side of the rock.
I'm not sure if I could be like happier with the defense than I am so far, because last season I kind of thought, like, even watching all 17 games, 19 including the playoffs, like, if you ask me my take on the 2023 Texans defense, I would say, middle of the pack, sometimes played well, gave up some leads and blew some leads in certain games. Like, it was fine. I thought it was relatively well coached. I really like this defense. It feels like what they try to do, this whole swarm thing, it is actually like, it actually manifests itself in the way they play. Tim Settle's been a nice pickup. Fotokasi's played well. Like, even some of these no-name guys in the front seven have done
Mario
a nice
Edwards
job.
is playing really well.
Yes, they had, linebackers out against Green Bay, Alshire, Toto. They still played well against the Packers on the road against one of the, up-and-coming teams.
Neville Hewitt.
Yes.
Stingley. Like, they've all filled in.
Stingley's played very well, I think. I think Kamari Lassiter's had a nice rookie season despite, the injuries and now the concussion. Petrie's had a much better season, even though, he can have some weird plays here and there. Like, I'm very happy with the defense overall. And so I guess if I take a step back, I say, okay, they still have a really talented quarterback. You get Nico back. I don't think, knock on wood, the offensive line can possibly be worse than they have. I'm not sure if the running game could be a lot worse. I also think they need to start mixing in more of these running backs when, Pierce is healthy and such. I think that would help. And so I come back to, like, no matter how negative we are, if this defense is still playing around this level, when they play Kansas City later in the season, when they play Baltimore later in the season, like, they're going to take this football team seriously because they have a top-notch defense and they have a quarterback who has a lot of talent.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's the thing. Like, it's not, I think this can travel in the postseason.
Yes.
Like, CJ, if CJ flipping the switch, I've seen stranger things than CJ Stroud flipping the switch. I've seen stranger things. Like, this defense is going to, like, whether it's cold or not, like, the defense is going to travel. I think we can agree on that.
Yes, you cut out for a second, but I think whatever you said, I agree with, because
the defense is going to travel. Whether it's cold weather in Kansas City, Baltimore, whatever, it's going to travel.
Yes, it's traveled so far. I am totally with you.
So that'll be interesting to see. Do you have any second guessing from the offseason at all? I haven't really asked you about this. I mean, the draft I don't think could have gone any better. The pieces that they brought in on defense have been solid. Do you have any off season or moves, like, regrets?
Great question. I would have to study it a little bit. Lassiter, I was wrong on in the sense that, I like Mike Sanderson out of Michigan, but Lassiter is better, and he's like a true outside corner. I think Fisher has upside. Bullock, I really like that pick, and that's hit so far. One thing I do wonder about Landry, it's kind of a random thing, but one thing that I think could help this offense a lot, like, boy, the tight end position just seems a little plodding. Like, it's a bunch of guys with the same. You know who they miss?
Brevin Jordan.
I know it. They miss Brevin Jordan.
No, they do. He might have been just a superior blocker to these two.
Yes, I don't think he could be worse than like that's a very quiet, underrated loss this season. This team could really use Brevin Jordan on the field.
You're not lying. Well, the one thing that I think, like, if we look at and say, and I don't even think it's like necessarily hindsight. I think releasing Noah Brown looks pretty weird now. I know Mechie had a good game, and I'm not saying that he would have contributed, but when you need him to step up, he was there to step up. I think that would be one thing where.
So who do you like right now? Like, let's say if Nico Collins wasn't playing, which I know he is, like, who do you take him over? Like, is it Xavier Hutchinson, basically?
Sims, Woods. I think Hutchinson is in his second year, so
yeah.
You got to develop with Hutch, but that's the other thing. And that's the other thing that I think is interesting, in that the guy that I would say is kind of the equivalent of Hutchinson in many ways is another reflection of the defense just being so far along on the offense, because I would say that Henry To'oTo'o is kind of the equivalent of Hutchinson on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
And he's done an admirable bit more than he's a good player. Like, I didn't know that. He said that he was fat last year and he wasn't in shape. That's what he said. But
he said he was fat.
Said I was a fat ass. I have the video. It's a quote. Yeah, it's a quote with me. He said I was a fat ass last year. But that's that quote. But he's been solid. I don't know that any of the guys on offense have taken like the next step or anything like that.
Yeah, the Hutchinson thing's been a little disappointing. I mean, listen, like, you look at the last month, could they have used Noah Brown? Absolutely. Do you arguably regret that release? Yes. I do think they were kind of in a tough spot in that, like, Hutchinson was a draft pick and is in his second year. The top three were obviously staying. Mechie was a high pick and obviously went through cancer. Sims, special teams. Woods was the guy who I thought, like, if you had asked me in February, I would have said, oh, this guy's a lock to be released. And maybe that's one that you look upon. They also obviously use him on special teams sometimes. I think he's a viable punt returner, but that would be the one, especially because they could have saved a bunch of money on the cap if they had released him.
Yeah, it's just Noah just was there to step up, but that's really the thing. I mean, they had a hell of a draft. I mean, and really the thing that is holding you back right now is, I mean, it's pretty much stuff that it's a Caserio thing. Like, it's a Caserio / I guess you can say BOB thing, depending on how you feel about the tackles, but it's not even DeMeco's doing. And that's the other thing, is that the talent and the talent acquisition, a lot of it has to do with resources, but it's been better when DeMeco has been here with Caserio. Outside of Nico Collins, like, you look at the offensive line, I mean, it's the weakness of the squad, and most of that was put together by Caserio without DeMeco, outside of Shaq and Juice.
I wonder, Landry, if you went back with 2020 hindsight and you knew that the offensive line was going to be around this bad, what would you have done in February, March, and April? I mean, I guess what you could do, like, guards are not cheap. Go ask Carolina. They spent a fortune on a couple of guards in free agency. But because you're running this, like, San Francisco, style system, you don't necessarily need, like, giants up front. Then I guess maybe what you do is you bring in another guard or two for, like, not that much money. And then you try to work those in like you did last season with the spare parts. But, like, even if you knew the offensive line was going to be this bad, what would you have done 7 months ago?
So you said at the start of this year, I would have made Kenyon Green compete. Like, that was the weird thing for me. Like, if we're talking hindsight, I would have made Kenyon Green at least have to earn his job.
Okay.
to where you're looking at Kendrick Green, you're looking at Jared Patterson, because I thought it was bizarre, or maybe they kind of had the benefit of the doubt and they knew what the hell they were doing, how Kenyon Green was handled. And I kind of roll my eyes whenever people say, well, he was a draft pick and they're trying to justify it. But I mean, how else do you explain how long Kenyon Green was remaining in that lineup and how they were talking about him and all that type of stuff? Like, is he even benched if he doesn't get hurt? I'm almost scared. I'm almost scared to think about it. Okay.
Based on how bad that Quinnen Williams matchup was going, I think so. So I didn't cover training camp. I just obviously just read about it, and I wasn't there. Did you feel, Landry, like they gave him the starting job? Like there was no competition at all?
There wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. No, there was none. Like it was never like a rotation or anything like that. There wasn't.
That surprises me. I mean,
yeah, he was first team, no questions asked. Yeah.
My guess from the outside is they liked Kenyon Green as a prospect. Obviously, they took him over a bunch of guys who I would have taken over him. But I guess that's water under the bridge. And he got hurt. He wasn't in shape. And this time he clearly, whatever we want to say about Kenyon Green, he was very much in shape for this season. So I guess they probably felt like, okay, he's done what we asked. He is healthy. He's in good shape.
Dude,
let's plug him in. This is the offensive line. Let's roll.
He is the perfect makeup and the perfect work ethic that you want. Like there's no questions about like the makeup, where Kenyon Green comes from. His parents seem to be really, really good people too. He's always accountable. He's been there every day since he's been hurt rehabbing. Like and maybe coaches and front offices just kind of like that type of guy, which I can't blame them. Like it just hasn't been a good fit. But as far as the hindsight, I would say that would probably be it. He obviously needed to be taken out perhaps sooner than he did, and there were struggles, and it kind of seemed like there was a little bit of coddling where it was, let's focus on the good plays from Kenyon Green, and it was like, why? Like, what are you, David Culley? But that just kind of seems to be a theme with the offensive line. But that would be my thing. I
saw Rod MJ commented that Green and Scruggs are first and second round busts. So Green agreed. Like, are you worried about what about Juice Scruggs? Where are you at with him? Or because that feels to me like
not be good, man. Like I'll just be honest. Like he might not be good. I don't want to completely dismiss him, but he
seemed promising last year when he was healthy.
Yeah, and the pass blocking was clearly better this past time. I want to see what the run game looks like when it's not DJ Reader and that Lions defense.
Okay.
I want to see kind of what it looks like, but I mean, I don't know what to make of Juice Scruggs. There seems to be miscommunication at center. I don't know whether it's his fault or not. But the one thing that I think is funny, and I don't know if you saw this, but this is right up your alley. This is the kind of stuff you like. But like, so last week we're in the media room, and they come in there and they go, "Hey, Chris Strausser's going to be here in 20 minutes, and he's going to be in the corner. It's not on camera. It's just interview only." And I was like, "What?
Does it make a difference?"
I guess they had requested him or something like that, and he has to talk if he's requested or whatever. And there had been a request earlier, but they bring Chris Strausser in. He's basically just in a corner, and like everyone's like talking to him and stuff. He's not at the podium, and he said something like that Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs were basically rookies this year, and that is part of the reason for the struggle. And I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Juice Scruggs was a rookie last year and he played better, and Jared Patterson was a rookie last year and he played okay too. So what are we doing here, Coach? Yeah. What is that part of the problem where that's how they're handling these guys? And then you hear DeMeco kind of do it as well. It's just kind of weird. The whole O-line thing is really weird.
Well, I understand the spirit of it. Seems like the spirit of what they're saying is, okay, these guys were here last year, but they didn't play full seasons or whatever. But they're not rookies. Like, they were there last season. They both played games. They both started games. They both played better last season than they played this season. Like, that has to matter. If you want to sell me on the idea of like, hey, they didn't play 17 games or 16 games, it's not going to be this like easy adjustment, plug them in, play 17 games, be a Pro Bowler. I get that and I can accept that. But like what happened last season, the experience should have some sort of value, and it feels like that has not panned out yet.
Do you think that there's a possibility that maybe DeMeco's kind of limited in overseeing an offense? And we see offensive coaches, sometimes they struggle with defense. Do you think like the reservations of hiring a defensive-minded head coach, they're rearing their ugly head, or you think this is just kind of a rough patch?
I'm not sure yet. I need to see more. Like, if the season keeps going like this and they, sneak into they win the division and, they lose in the wild card round of the playoffs and they don't look great doing it offensively, like, does he make the decision to fire the offensive coordinator? I think DeMeco is a little too conservative, like the Fairbairn stuff we mentioned 20, 30 minutes ago. For my liking, considering who you have at quarterback and who you have on the outside as weapons, maybe. I don't know yet, though, Landry. For me, I'm more of it because it's in the middle of his second season. It's a wait and see a little bit on that.
Yeah, it's too early for me to just completely say that. But I do think that if you were someone who was saying that, I think you can at least be heard right now. Like you can do can do like some sort of victory lap, because it doesn't just get dismissed after one season. Like this is where if you were one of those, and I wouldn't trade DeMeco for any coach. I've said this before. The execute bid is a little bit exhausting, but it is what it is with that. But I wouldn't trade DeMeco for any head coach. But I do think that if you were one of the people who said they need an offensive-minded head coach, I think you can at least be heard right now. At the very least, there's at least like some warning signs of it.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, when you look at someone like DeMeco Ryans, I'm always thinking about, you're a head coach and you're going to have some specialty side of the football. In his case, it's obviously defense. I didn't have any complaints with the coaching last season defensively, and I certainly have no issues with the coaching defensively this season. So this is not a Brian Billick situation where you're like, why is the guy who was hired to have an explosive offense like so limited on his side of the ball? That's not the case. DeMeco Ryans was not brought here to like develop the running game or to, create some sort of high explosive offense. That's based on the guys he hires. So that's why I'm in a wait and see approach. Is this a bad season from Bobby Slowik? Is he simply a bad offensive coordinator? Has he regressed? Would he be better next season? I don't know the answers to these questions, but that will bear directly on your question of like, does he have a weakness on the offensive side of the ball? Maybe.
The news, DeMeco did say that Nico Collins will practice this week after whatever the hell happened this weekend. I'm team rest.
I was fine with that. You guys seem very upset by that whole thing. I was surprised a little bit.
Me or Stoots?
Just in general, the whole universe.
I'm saying rest him. I said
you did.
Yeah, no, I'm saying rest him. Stoots was pissed.
Stoots seemed upset.
Stoots said that DeMeco disrespected the fans.
Really? He said that?
Yes. Stoots said that DeMeco disrespected the fans. But matter of fact, I'm going to pull this up. Let me see this. Let me see this real quick. I want to see your reaction to this because I think you like when Stoots gets angry at this. Let me see.
Because he rarely gets this angry.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, here it is. Here's Stoots getting ticked off. Nico Collins. That's another question that is asked. And I want to ask this about Nico Collins. Was the handling of Nico Collins a bit? Did you think that was a big bit, the manner in which they handled Nico Collins? I've made it very clear. I don't mind if you're going to rest Nico Collins after you see all the teams in the division lose, and you're just going to try to be as healthy as possible at the end of the season and all that, because I'm okay with that as long as you keep your elite talent healthy. I know a lot of people disagree. I get it. But the manner in which they handled it, did you think that was a little bitty by DeMeco Ryans?
Totally. And I can't. They could do what you're agreeing with, which is the not play Nico Collins and not have done a bit. And you're the king of calling out bad bits. I can't believe this didn't infuriate you the way they operated with this. If they didn't want to play Nico Collins against the Detroit Lions, they didn't have to open his practice window. They didn't have to put him on the active roster. And there wouldn't even have been a question that he was playing on Sunday night. But they practiced him on a Friday practice that's basically a walkthrough. They put him on the active roster after they opened the practice window, and he had no chance of playing, it seems. Like, that was bad by the Houston Texans, and I didn't like that, and I thought it was dumb. It gave you no advantage over the Detroit Lions to do that. The Lions didn't stay up for 2 days straight trying to rework their defensive game plan to get ready for Nico Collins maybe playing. It was a bad bit. I didn't like it. I felt it was disrespectful to the fans to give them the hope that Nico Collins is going to play on primetime. I didn't like it.
So do you think, Landry, as far as what they actually did, do you think part of their thinking was, hey, the Colts lost?
That's my theory. That's my theory. I actually think that if they were in a tough division race, I think honestly they looked at the Nico Collins situation and he doesn't seem that hurt. Like he does. I don't like that Aaron Wilson is saying, and shout out to Aaron Wilson for calling the offensive line shuffle. So I don't mean this bad, but he has said that he's 100%. I kind of feel like that puts Nico in a weird spot. Oh, he's 100%, but he's not there. But I do think that part of the reason why they put him on IR was because the schedule was laid out to where he would have had to play 4 games and he would have had to play 2 games in 4 days or 5 days, with the second game being on that jet surface where he got hurt last year. So I thought they were conservative there, but I do wonder if they saw every team in the AFC South lost. We still have a 2+ game lead and we don't need to force it with Nico Collins. And oh, by the way, they still probably should have won that game against the Lions.
Yeah, they still should have won the game. I didn't study it enough to figure out, like, okay, they activated him, so somebody, was not available to play. I didn't go that granular into it. But yeah, for me, like, I thought even when he was activated on the roster, myself, I wasn't thinking like, oh, he's definitely going to play in this football game. Maybe other people felt that way. I can tell you this, Landry, kind of zooming out on this, going through the Andre Johnson experience, especially from 2010 to 14, like these hamstring injuries, I'm very much of the belief of, like, I'd rather err on the side of caution as opposed to being a little bit too aggressive with those guys, even if they seem like they're 100% or close.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the luxury you have in the situation you're in. I think the Bills are kind of doing that with Amari Cooper, to be honest with you. Like we've seen him miss the last couple of games. I think they're trying to have him healthy because their division's the only division that's worse than the Texans right now.
Yeah, they're a complete lock to win that division. Yeah, those hamstring issues are tricky because it's like, if he pulls that thing again, then he might be out the rest of the season. And so I'm not going to risk that just to get, a 5% extra chance or whatever to win the Lions game. That's one that you have to be conservative. And I think the way you laid it out with the way the schedule has been with those 2 games in 5 days, plus playing the Jets on the bad surface at MetLife, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and we'll see how it goes. I do think he makes your offense a lot better. I think he probably makes the offensive line better. I mean, hopefully there's some sort of quick game now with Nico Collins.
That would be nice.
Bobby Slowik can
that's another frustration. Like, why is it that, like, any play with any level of deception, whether it's like a reverse or a draw or a screen, like, even those plays don't work. Like, give me
that reverse the other day was that.
Oh my God, give me something that works.
That was awkward.
Yeah, that was awkward.
That was an awkward reverse. What'd you make of the fade to CJ Stroud with Joe Mixon?
Didn't really make I didn't like it for a few reasons, like the second down time and place, and like CJ's not the kind of athlete to where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, Landry. It wasn't like
typically when you throw to a quarterback, it's like, okay, he's wide open, and you're basically throwing it to him. It's not, hey, go up there and be freaking Randy Moss and run a fade against one of the opposing team's best corners. Like that's not typically how that works. Like I know they said Mixon threw a touchdown or whatever in Cincy, and it's like, yeah, I mean there was some sort of trickeration. They literally just threw a fade up to CJ Stroud. Like if you're gonna do that, like give Xavier Hutchinson a shot. Like or someone else. Like
what yard line were they on? They were like on the 10 or 15. It's not like the Philly special was at the 2 or 3 yard line. So
it was at the 6, I think.
Yeah, like when you're running those kind of trick plays, you basically are, unless you have like a Jeff Driscoll level athlete or a Lamar at quarterback or somebody along those lines. I can't believe I put those guys in the same sentence, but like those guys have to be completely wide open. You have to totally deceive the defense, and that's much harder to do at like the 10 or 15 yard line. So I didn't like the call.
I thought the most telling quote from the weekend was from Joe Mixon, where Joe Mixon said that he said that we need to quit playing not to lose and play to win. And I think that's as big of a call out as you can possibly have. That's pretty cut and dry, right?
That's cut and dry. Yes. And that's Landry. That's the way that second half felt the moment that CJ threw that first pick on that first play from scrimmage to begin the second half, because we've talked a lot and I love CJ, but you have to say, and I was thinking about this just driving around this week, like, those two interceptions, and I don't always crush quarterbacks for interceptions because you're going to throw some picks when you're going to be aggressive. But my God, like,
no, he wasn't good. He wasn't good. He took the blame for the loss. Like he wasn't good.
Yes, but the weird thing was he was so good in the first half. Like he was so good in the first half. Collinsworth was loving it, and then like those two interceptions were just like, say what you will about Bobby Slowik, like he was not at fault in my view on those plays, and those plays were just. Yeah. They were killers.
What do you make of the fact that, and I admitted that I would have just taken it to the house, but what do you make of the fact they call timeout and then in under 2 minutes they execute a touchdown drive with John Mechie?
It is something that I think if you want to do the reverse of the Jeff Van Gundy, like let's take a look at the things that you would have been happy about if you had won that game as opposed to things you ignore after a win. I think there's something to that, Landry. The idea that like, okay, everything's out. There's no pressure on. Nobody has to think about anything. It's the 2-minute drill. It's the quarterback show. It's not like you're looking back at the sideline and they had their best drive of the game during the 2-minute drill. I think that's something they have to look at moving forward. That says something.
Yeah, it does, because it's the offense. The offense looked good, and it seems like that's kind of their thing. We'll see what Slowik says. Slowik speaking on Friday this week. Normally, he speaks on Thursday. That should be an interesting press conference from old Bobby.
What's your number one question for Bobby Slowik? You're an expert on this.
I've already said it. Why should people think that Bobby Slowik is the right guy to oversee this offense? He's just dropped second year. Period.
But that's not a question for him, though. To be fair, I think that's more of a question.
He can say, like, what's your confidence level that you yourself can get this right? Like, what?
That's fair.
Why should people believe that? Because, like, look, we've been chasing our tail the last 4 weeks. Like, it's been the same question. So it's real simple. And I mean, it's not a straw man argument. Like, he is public enemy number one right now. And I'm not even saying whether it's fair or not. I think it is. I think it's fair to question Bobby Slowik, but like from the fan base and from what I'm seeing, like the biggest gripe right now is Bobby Slowik.
No question. Yes. And that by the way, is not just
not a lot of variables or anything like that. The offensive line and Bobby Slowik. The offensive line nationally is one of the biggest jokes in the NFL. Like they are a joke.
I was just going to say, from a national standpoint,
that's not me. Nationally, they think the offensive line is a joke.
Yes. The offensive line has been crushed nationally, and like the film, like guru, like types, they also don't like Bobby Slowik, and right. I'm kind of amused by the whole thing.
Yeah, they're jumping on Bobby Slowik and they're jumping on the offensive line, but that is the national thing. That's not like some sort of straw man, some sort of made up type of thing. So
yeah, this isn't one of those like, oh, this football team's actually doing fairly well, and the team and like the fans and the media are so like in their own universe that they can't see the bigger picture. No, like there's a lot of national frustration over this offense.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, the one thing, like if we're following the moves, I do think that it's obvious that they don't like the depth at receiver because they made the Stefon Diggs trade for a reason,
which is weird.
Well, I mean, yeah, they made the Stefon Diggs trade for a reason, right? They didn't think these guys were good. So that's another thing, is that wide receiver depth is rough. The Dalton Schultz thing, to go back to that, like it's just, I don't know what to think of it. Like I don't even know if it's Dalton Schultz. I think it's just the fact that normally whenever you see teams that have like, and I'm going to use an extreme comparison, like big time. Well, I mean, we can even localize it too, but like the ultimate tight end like duos, like you think Aaron Hernandez and Gronk, and those are two completely different players. Like
Yes.
Brevin Jordan and Dalton Schultz, like they complement each other. They're two different players, like you had last year. It just doesn't seem like there's any, like it almost seems like Cade Stover is a worse version of Dalton Schultz in every way, shape, or form. So as far as that element at tight end, like there's nothing there, there's no like extra element. And then you see Dalton Schultz and you say, a lot of time when you're watching, you're like, okay, they don't ask the tight ends to do a lot. Like, is this guy washed or what? But then you see him every time that he gets an opportunity, he makes big ass plays, and then they just don't even go back to him. Like in the Green Bay game, Stover and Schultz combined on one drive for the second most tight end production this team had all season long. And then you see Dalton Schultz. I think there was a 3rd and 6 where he picked up 30 yards this week. Like it seems like there's potential. It just seems like the position as a whole, there's no like complement. There's no balance. There's not multiple elements.
It's frustrating because if you were to ask me last season, maybe even early into this season, like who's the guy who CJ Stroud trusts the most on a big third down? He looks for 86 in those spots. And maybe it's the loss of Jordan to remove that like natural complement. And maybe it's also a function of just how poor the offensive line has been in pass protection, which also impacts this. But yeah, like the tight end room has been just uninspiring at best with this offense.
Yeah.
Totally uninspiring.
Yeah, it's very uninspiring. Rocky on the super. 3rd and 4th, we need first down. When what do we call?
Pass.
A pass, and let CJ Stroud have the option of moving around with it, I would say.
I was looking at something, Landry. It's a little bit random, but if there's any one stat that kind of symbolizes how we feel, you know what that one stat is?
Point differential -2.
Correct. Point differential.
18th in the league. 18th in the league. Only team in the playoff picture with a negative point differential. Colts are -8, by the way.
Here's what's very weird, Landry. If you look at the NFL, and there's probably some statistical word for this that I don't know, there's almost no team that's around the Texans. Like,
no
team
that's not just awful. Like Indianapolis, I think is off, right?
Indianapolis is -15.
Okay,
Cincy is +8. But like, if you were to distribute the point differentials on a graph, it's basically like you'd have a bunch of teams that are awful, a bunch of teams that are really good, but not a lot of teams in the middle. It's basically Cincinnati, Houston, Indianapolis, and the Atlanta Falcons, maybe Tampa and Arizona mixed in. Like, that's it. There are like 7 teams who are in their general territory. And Arizona's been great recently.
And I still think the arrow's up, like with not up. The ceiling, the possibility of reaching a high ceiling is still there with the Texans. Which brings me to the next question: do you think this team can make a run?
I'm going to say yes, because the quarterback, the way the defense is played, you'll get Will Anderson back, and obviously you're going to get Nico Collins back. And I believe in the coach, and I believe in the quarterback.
Yeah, I do too. And I think the defense travels. Like if you were offensive dependent, like we've seen it many times, like you have to go to Kansas City or New England back in the day or something like that. And it's like, you see them like on TV, they're breathing and the smoke's coming out of their helmet and stuff. Defense travels. Like the defense is going to travel no matter what. The offense, who knows? I do think you talked about them not being able to run the ball. I do think Joe Mixon has the ability to make the offensive line look better. I think Nico Collins has the ability to make the offensive line better. So, like with all this said, the reason that you're talking about the Texans this way is because the expectations have risen. And do I feel great about what they've done against contender? No, like there's problems and there's hints. Like there's hints. It's a fluid process, but I'm not just ready to just completely dismiss this. And the other thing is, you look at the teams that you're competing with. Baltimore and Kansas City are the 2 teams you look at. Then you talk about Buffalo. Buffalo, I know you beat them once. They were kind of banged up, but you have beaten them. And then the other teams –
Am I supposed to take over? This is a great question. Can everyone hear me? This is not what I was expecting. Frozen in space. Has Landry's YouTube been given over to me? This is the weirdest thing ever. God, this is crazy. I was not expecting.
And we had the dog pull a cord. So
it was the dog's fault.
Yeah, dog pulled a cord and then just went and laid right under its bed. So yeah, how'd you hold it down solo?
Horribly. Because I wasn't sure what happened. I wasn't sure if I was still on, even though I was moving. So I should have thought I am still on.
Dog poked the cord, man.
That was my worst job of ad-libbing basically ever.
You're a little rusty.
I'm a little rusty. Yes, that's exactly right.
You're a little rusty, but we were talking about. I do think this team has the ability and the talent to flip the switch for sure. I definitely think they can make a run.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I'm not going to be overly negative because, again, like they blew a game to Green Bay. They blew a golden opportunity on Sunday. But you think about who they were playing in those spots. Like the Lions may win the Super Bowl this season, and you were crushing them for a while. Like the fact that you can play at that level, that it's even possible, says something about the ultimate ceiling of this football team.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. What do you think about this Cowboys game? I've said that this is a game that the Cowboys cannot the Texans cannot lose to the Cowboys. I think for the sake of the fan base, and there's a weird obsession with the Cowboys around here, which I think is kind of strange. But it is what it is. It's I-40. I get it. Like Cowboy, the fans kind of get annoyed by Cowboys fans, and I get it. But if you lose to this Cowboys team on Monday night and you lose your third straight primetime game, I think DeMeco is going to be like the honeymoon is going to be way more than over, and they're going to and changes are going to be called for like crazy.
Yes, and not that any changes would happen. Yeah, this is one of those games, Landry. If I were on the air every day, this game worries me a little bit.
Really,
I know, and there's no logical. Well, I don't love that it's on the road. Now, maybe losing such a horrible game at home, maybe being on the road is a benefit. Like if Trey Lance was starting in this game, I'd say, boy, there's like that dude is just, he's not very good. He's all over the place, doesn't really know what he's doing. Maybe Cooper Rush can do enough. The Cowboys are 0-4 at home. I worry that like the Cowboys have been so bad this season, and their season is now officially over, like completely over. We know Dak's out for the season with the hamstring injury and the subsequent surgery, that like you wonder maybe with the pressure, if there is pressure now, is so completely off that they're playing at home and maybe they're due for a decent home performance. That's what worries me. And also like there's way more pressure, obviously, the Texans to win this game. They should win the game.
They're
but
terrible.
It would be a terrible loss.
You have one receiver you have to worry about. You would think Stingley would be able to hold his own. The defense is going to make it hard on Cooper Rush. I think there's no doubt about that. Trey Lance might come in at some point. I think he's probably on standby. But I mean, and Micah Parsons can probably wreak some havoc. But I don't.
That's the worry. That's the worrisome thing. Like
you can't lose this one.
Yes, we're on the same page. They cannot lose this game, and given how well they played with the run defense against one of the best running games in football with the Lions, against Dowdle, Zeke, and company, they should at minimum shut down the run and put this game completely on the arm of Cooper Rush, which should be a recipe for victory. I just wish I was a little bit more confident in the offense. But if you get Nico back, that'll make me feel a lot better.
He is practicing this week, so we'll see how that goes. Melts, appreciate you for joining me. It's nice to talk to you about the Cowboys. Congratulations on your partnership with the law firm. I'm sure.
I appreciate that. Yes, Mize Meltser PLLC. Yes,
Mize Meltser. Look at that right there. Look at this guy.
Yes, if it happens at work, we can help. That's our motto. So there you go.
Wait, what?
You don't like the motto. If it happens at work, we can help.
Oh, so you're a work guy.
All we do is employment.
Okay, well, nice. Very nice.
And nice. I little self-promotion. I'll be on Mad Dog Sports Radio this Sunday night from 10 p.m. until 1 Central after all the
What
games.
a perfect night shift right there. If you're gonna do a radio night shift, that's the perfect one right there.
It's a good one. Yeah. So I'll be on Sunday nights.
That is nice. All right, man. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Landry. Have a good one.
All right, there you go. It's Mike Meltser, State of the Texans, 10 weeks in. It's good hearing from him. Good hearing from you. SNL at 9 a.m. I'm gonna check on the dog. Hold on, let me see this dog. Let me show you. Let me show you why we went off the air, because this dog is crazy. Hold up. Pacey. Pacey. Come here. Come here, you crazy little puppy. Come here. Crazy pup ran over the cord. She doesn't care. Go back to sleep. Love you. Appreciate y'all for coming through. Subscribe, like, ride along. Always remember, when it comes to this Texas stuff, we're all in it together. Talk to you at 9 a.m. Texans off tomorrow. We're going to have open locker room on Thursday. Bobby Slowik speaks on Friday, and we'll hear what good old Bobby has to say. Appreciate y'all.
Damn it, Bobby.
What we about to do, localize every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways.